with our listeners so they understand, because obviously I'm in Australia and our pap smears here are every 2 years, but then it's recently changed. I think as of from last year, it's every 5 years if you've never had any abnormal cells or anything like that. Is that similar to what it is in the UK now?
I think it was every 3 years back then, but I'm not sure whether they've changed that more recently or not. But I know you start from something like early 20s and then you get called back on a regular 3-year basis.
Yeah. So, and that's on National Health, so it's all paid for.
Yeah, completely.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's just like, obviously my Eve is only 18 and she's, asking, they know that I've been, I get pap smears, no big secret, but she'll say, I don't know about getting, and I'm like, but it could potentially save your life. It's just there's nothing to be embarrassed about. But there's so many people who are still really embarrassed. I've got so many friends who, in conversation, you're out for dinner and you're chatting, they're saying, actually, I haven't been for quite a few years, and it blows my mind. Do you find that?
Yeah, the same. I've had friends say the same to me, and that's the thing with my situation. I was not that person. I went regularly every time I was called.
So all your checkups, everything?
Yeah, just went in, so I'd done everything by the book.
Yeah. So when the day you, say if it was the second year or the third year, however that plays in the UK at that time, you get a letter with an appointment to remind you to go in. You go in, you have the pap smear as normal.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's no concerns because nothing's ever been flagged before, and you're just like, tick, done for the next couple of years. Is that right?
Yeah, you just wait for your letter to say everything's fine, and then you get called back after a few years.
So, and you had no reason to be concerned?
Not at all. I was completely really healthy, felt great, didn't have anything to be concerned about, so it was just a regular thing.
Cycle was all normal and everything was good?
Yeah.
So you then go about your day. What, couple of weeks later you get a letter, or what happens?
Yeah, I got a letter to say they'd found some abnormal cells, and then again that's a routine procedure where you just go in and they'll take away the cells. It's happened to friends of mine where that's your early warning of something wrong, so they go in, have the cells removed, and then things normalise and you're just back in the regular cycle. So I wasn't even at that point concerned
at all.
No.
So then you go and have the treatment where they like burn away the abnormal cells, don't they?
Use like a loop and they burn. They burn
Is
the
it
cells
painful?
away. No, it wasn't particularly painful that I remember. I just remember like watching it on the screen and just seeing what they were doing, and the specialist who was actually performing the procedure, looked at it and said, "This does not look like cancer." So I felt very reassured, and I came away again just expecting to have the letter within 2 weeks to say the cells were removed, everything's fine, we'll see you again in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, brilliant. And so how long was it before you heard of them?
I think it was 3 days.
3 days?
Yeah.
And where were you at the time? How did
I was actually at home, and I got a phone call back in the days of landlines. I got a phone call at home from the doctors saying that I needed to come in and see the hospital as soon as possible if I could get in on Monday. So I made an appointment for Monday, and I had the weekend to think about that, and I knew there was something seriously wrong, because you don't get that call within 2 or 3 days of a procedure without something seriously being wrong.
So were you... I would imagine it'd be fairly normal. I mean, of course, you're going to worry. I would imagine, because you said going into it, you felt perfectly healthy, normal, no issues, medical issues or anything like that. Then did you, when you got the call and said to come in on the Monday, so you've got all that weekend to think about it, are you then getting in your own head going, well, actually, oh my God, what have they found? Oh, I do actually feel a little bit, my cycles are a bit late, or I've got stomach cramps a bit more than I would normally. Are you starting to overthink it that way, or are you just kind of bracing yourself? And
I think I was just bracing myself for the news that I knew I was going to hear. And I actually said to my boyfriend at the time, I've got cancer and I'll need a hysterectomy. That's exactly what I said to him. I just knew I did without them having to even tell me.
Is that just like an intuition, just that gut instinct?
Yeah, just a gut instinct. I thought that this has got to be bad news. That, they don't call you in within 2 or 3 days. It's got to be something serious.
And did you tell anyone else then over that weekend?
Just my boyfriend.
So you just kept it to yourself other than him?
I didn't want to worry anybody at that point, even though I was quite certain. I didn't want to speak up until I'd had a diagnosis.
Yeah. So you get through the weekend as best you can, and which probably would have felt like 2 days, felt like 21 days. Did you go straight to the hospital the next day then to have your consult?
Went on the Monday and I went to work first. So they made me an appointment. I think it was something like mid-morning. So I just went into the office for a couple of hours, left. It was only down the road, so I could walk there. Walked in to my appointment where I was seen by a doctor and 3 or 4 nurses. And that's when I knew this was serious, that I could see 4 or 5 pair of eyes just looking at you. Yeah.
And so what happened then? You go in, you sit down.
And they say, have you completed your family? And I replied, I haven't even started.
Oh my God.
And that's when they told me that they'd found cancer and I'd need a hysterectomy and that I needed to go and have further tests to understand whether the cancer had spread anywhere else and just to get a sense of what they were dealing with and how big the tumour was.
So you're on your own there.
Yeah.
You're trying to process all this information, I would imagine, almost having a bit of a out-of-body experience. What happens then? Like, how does that look? What are the next steps from there?
So they give me some forms where I had to go to different parts of the hospital. So I had to go and have a blood test. I had to go and make an appointment for an MRI scan to have a look at the size of the tumour and see whether there was anything else they could see. They also gave me a bunch of leaflets in a folder, which were lots of different information ranging from the initial diagnosis right through to palliative care.
Oh, Jesus.
So I sat and read those that evening and over that week. So it really does terrify you because at that point I had no idea the extent of what I was dealing with, whether there was other areas that I had cancer. So it was a really scary time.
And it's, obviously they're doing the right thing as in giving you all this information and almost kind of giving you worst case scenario. But, how the saying goes, what is it? It's not the diagnosis that kills you, it's the prognosis.
Yeah.
And I can believe that because it's almost putting a time on it or, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Giving you that worst case scenario. You need to know that to be equipped for that. But at the same time, it's like, let's just slow everything down here. So have you then shared it? Because your boyfriend, as we've said before, he lives a few hours away, so he's not with you. You've gone to this day. You went back to work.
Yeah, I did. I don't know what I was thinking, but I think I was just on autopilot and I thought, okay, I've got to get these things done. I need to go back to the office. I've got 2 really big meetings this afternoon and I can't let work down. And
how ridiculous is that?
Yeah,
how we normalise things like that.
The things you put above your own health and well-being are crazy sometimes. And I just had this, huge sense of obligation. Went back to the office, fully thinking that I could do this meeting. And within minutes, I knew there was absolutely no way. I was on the verge of tears and I had to go and say, look, I've had some really bad news and I'm not going to be able to stay the afternoon.
So who did you tell, your boss?
I told the director who I was meant to be meeting with, and I'm my boss, and then I just left.
Gosh. And so you've gone home, you're trying to process, and then waiting for your results to come back as well, like...
Yeah. Yeah, that took a while because I think it took about 3 or 4 weeks to get everything together. So to get the test results back to them, they then have to review all the test results, and then they make an assessment of the stage of cancer that they think it's at, and then what is the treatment plan for that.
And so how long did you have to wait for all that
It was
information?
about 4 weeks, as I remember.
Oh my
So
God,
it's
that's
really,
such a long time.
It's a really worrying time.
Oh my God. And so what were you doing during that time? Were you...
I was wrapping up some things with work, so I was still kind of in that mindset where I can't let people down. So, and I had a really, really hectic job. And so I was trying to tie up all those loose ends, just trying to reflect and think about what was going to happen. And yeah, just take some time out because it was just devastating. And the thing was telling people as well, which was very difficult. So I limited to just a handful of people close to me, and then even my family. I asked my mum.
Why was that, do you think?
Because I couldn't.
How did you tell your mum? Did you go over or did you call her?
Yeah, I went over that afternoon and saw my mum, and I remember it really clearly what I said. I just said, "Mum, don't go mad. There's something I need to tell you."
Don't go mad?
Yeah, don't go mad. I think I was just scared of what the reaction would be, as if it was somehow my fault. And because I was in such a state of shock,
Of course.
I think I couldn't handle a huge reaction like that. And I did find that with other people that I told as well. It's very difficult to keep your own emotions in check while you're dealing with other people's emotional reactions.
You don't have the space.
No, you don't. And so I had such a variety of responses from people. It just becomes easier to just keep it to yourself and let other people speak on your behalf, just so the news gets out.
Yeah, of course.
But not from you.
Yeah. Well, you've got enough going on trying to process all of this, and also you're living on your own, so you're going home to an empty house.
Exactly.
Which seems really empty when you're going through something as traumatic as that. And then you're just waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting for those results to come through. When the results came in, did they call you in? Was that on the phone or?
Yeah, they did. I think we spoke on the phone, and they said you need to have a hysterectomy and you need to come in ASAP. So they were looking at scheduling something. They were trying, I think it was maybe middle of one week, and they were trying to get me to come in early the next. And I just said, no, I'm not prepared to come in that soon, because again, I think I knew I wouldn't be the same again, and I'd wanted some time where I could just be myself. I ended up organising a big night out, and we got a hotel in Manchester, and I just wanted to have some fun and still be me.
Because you knew that was all about to change drastically.
Yeah, I did.
You said before earlier on, and you mentioned that you always, well, not always knew, but you thought that you never wanted to have children before this happened. So earlier on you mentioned, we've talked about it a few times, but about, growing up, and certainly in your 20s and your 30s, you thought that you didn't want to have children. And when obviously you've gone in and they've asked you, have you finished with your family? And you're like, I haven't even started, or, I haven't had children. Are you going, did they talk to you about this, or did you go at some point during that consult or afterwards say, well, actually, I don't want to have children, so we don't need to worry about any of that? What was that conversation like with them?
I didn't really have that conversation, to be honest. I think somewhere was mentioned freezing eggs. I think from my perspective, given that I didn't want children, my focus was more on surviving the cancer and not around trying to preserve my fertility. But then there was another part that was thinking, well, what if I change my mind further down the line?
Yeah.
And also...
Because how old are you then?
37.
37, yeah.
So also around me, my friends are all having children.
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting because I always remember the ages of my friends' children because it's the year that I had a hysterectomy.
Really?
Yeah, and that's how I know how old a lot of my friends' children are, because they were the same, going through that at the same time they were having children. So, yeah.
So it's a case of, you know, you always want what you can't have, and I suppose, like, I didn't have children till later on, you know, for my first at 32, 33. You know, even then you kind of think, oh, if it happens, it happens. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, I mean, you know, all of a sudden that's now put in front of you. Well, actually, you can't. Did you look at, you said you looked at the options of freezing your eggs. Did you actually go and see, was there a time frame where you could go and see someone before you had your surgery about freezing your eggs?
Yeah, I did go and see a specialist about that. And I did, you know, I had the scans, I did have a lot of eggs. It was positive from that perspective, but he was very much of the opinion that due to my age, the success rate was likely to be very low. So really did his best.
But not
to
impossible.
dissuade me. Not impossible. Not impossible. Actually, it was after the hysterectomy that happened, because they didn't take my ovaries.
Right.
So I could still have egg retrieval.
Yeah.
So, because it was, I remember them asking me at the appointment, oh, when was your last period? I'm just like, do you not know I've had a hysterectomy?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah,
I mean,
there were lots of instances like that where the questions and the
that
comments
should be
were,
in bold writing at the top,
that's
shouldn't
why
it?
I'm
Given
there.
that
Yeah.
that's just crazy. Like, you know, you'd be doing your homework and reading through, wouldn't you? It's already there's so many women and that, you know, their partners go with them, and it's such a sensitive subject anyway. To not have done the due diligence beforehand is just...
It's crazy. Everybody's circumstances are so different, and you've got to handle those situations with real sensitivity in that line of work.
Yeah, of course.
So I found that quite incredible.
I'm so sorry that happened. So you have your 2 weeks prior to the surgery. You start putting, you know, obviously getting things together, trying to get your head around it as best you can, having some girl time and some downtime just to feel like you describe as you for as long as you possibly can. And then you go into hospital 2 weeks later and you have the surgery. Have they had that conversation with you that they will be able to save your ovaries, or they don't know until they go in?
Yeah, we've had the conversation, and they don't recommend removing the ovaries. They were just going to do a hysterectomy, remove a lot of the surrounding tissue, but they, unless there's cancer detected there, they wouldn't remove the ovaries. You'd go straight into a full menopause. And they said it's just unnecessary to remove them.
Yeah. So you go in, obviously you got family are all on board and probably beside themselves. You go in, you have your surgery, you wake up from your surgery. Your surgery was quite a long surgery. Your recovery, what was that like?
Yeah, the surgery was quite long. It was over 2 hours because they do remove other tissue and the lymph nodes as well, so they can dissect them to see whether there's any cancer cells in the lymph.
Yeah.
So it is quite an involved operation, but I had quite a difficult recovery. I was sick. I was in a lot of pain. My mum was frantic because I was meant to be back on the ward. I went down around 8:30 in the morning. I was meant to be back on the ward by lunchtime, and I didn't come back up until around 5 p.m.
Oh, that's so scary.
Because, yeah, my pain was out of control. I was just feeling things I shouldn't be feeling, and yeah, it was a really, really difficult time. And then, you know, my mum's on the other end of the phone trying to get answers, and all she's hearing is she's not back up yet. And, you know, just you'd think the worst in those situations.
Of course. I mean, for you, obviously you're in extreme pain but a lot of drugs in the body and still wearing off the anaesthetic and so forth. No concept of time whatsoever. I mean, it could have been 24 hours for you or 3 hours. You've got no concept of time. But for family who are waiting, those minutes and those hours would be horrendous for them as well from that side. It really does have that ripple effect, doesn't it?
It does, because then you think, oh, something's gone wrong and
of course
what's happened. And
yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. So once they got your pain managed as best they could, and obviously then your surgeon comes to your bed and then they tell you, you know, whether that's the next day or whatever, how that surgery went. You didn't know they were going to take your lymph nodes? Had they warned you about that? Or
yeah, they said they might. So it was in my head, because they'd also told me about another option that could preserve my fertility as well, which wouldn't have been as big an operation. So I was considering that, but in the end I went with the hysterectomy. But it's standard practice to remove the lymph nodes just to check there's nothing in there.
Yeah. So when they gave you the result, obviously, amazingly, they got everything they needed to. It hadn't spread anywhere else, had it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you go home. How long are you in hospital for? A few days?
A few days.
Then you go home and you start your recovery, which is huge recovery. How are you feeling then? Like, as far as obviously extremely sore, but how's your headspace? Like, how are you feeling?
I think I felt, it's interesting. I didn't really feel much emotionally at that point. It was more around the physical, because I was struggling to walk. I couldn't stand up straight. I was hunched over like an old lady. I was in a lot of pain. It was difficult. The recovery was difficult. And I think it was just, I was sleeping a lot. So really it was just trying to get over that physical pain.
Yeah. Go for your follow-up after your surgery, and they obviously everything went as well as it could. Like, everything, was amazing in that sense. Like, it turned out well, like they'd got all the cancer all good. They said, did you ask for an update, like if anything had been flagged, or what the whys and the hows or anything like that?
I did definitely think something strange had gone on, because you don't expect to go from having a clear smear test to then going back 3 years later and suddenly you've got cancer. This particular cancer is slow growing.
Right.
So it just seemed like it came out of nowhere, and what is all that about? But that was just a thought I was having in my brain, and I didn't really verbalise that. But at my appointment, the specialist said for people that have cervical cancer, we then go back and check their previous smear tests, and we get them re-examined and see whether there was anything we missed. And that process takes around about 6 months.
Right.
And we'll let you know when that's concluded. So I thought, okay. I didn't think anything of it at that point. I just thought it was a standard procedure, and just came away and didn't give it too much thought.
And then, so did it take 6 months before they came back to you?
They didn't actually come back to me,
right.
Interestingly. I said that I was going to see them every 3 months anyway, because I had to have my checkups. And at one of those routine appointments, I just said, like, what happened with that review? Do you have the results of the checking of my previous tests? And I know they only go back 10 years, because anything older than that, the samples have degraded to a point where they can't be retested.
Right.
And he opened the folder and he had a list of the test dates, and every single one came back with abnormalities. Some of them severe, but every single test.
Oh my God.
So for 10 years and probably longer, they just couldn't say, this had been silently growing.
That's insane. So what are you thinking then?
Oh, I was absolutely livid. I mean, it's one thing to have bad luck, and maybe to have one wrong test, or even just to have bad luck and to have cancer, irrespective, it may not have shown up in any of the tests. It's something that just happens.
Yeah.
But to see that over and over and over again,
oh my
they've
God,
misdiagnosed these tests, was the biggest slap in the face. I could not believe what I was seeing.
And obviously family are all rallying around you.
Yeah.
Are you like with yourself and as far as your recovery and having all that, but so used to your independence as well normally and living on your own, and then all of a sudden you lived with your mum for a while, didn't you? And then you went to live with your boyfriend for a little bit. How did that feel for you?
It's hard when you can't do simple things like sit up in bed unaided.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very difficult being, and I've always been super independent, and so that recovery period was very tough.
Are you processing at this stage that obviously you're trying to heal from a physical perspective, but are you processing mentally that you've had cancer, you've had it removed? Are you processing all this at this point, or are you just one foot in front of the other, just because it from start to finish it happened so quickly, didn't it?
Yeah. No, I wasn't processing it emotionally at all. It was just, even from the day I got diagnosed, there was a plan. It's like, right, you go and get your tests, then you do this, then you do that, then we'll tell you what the treatment plan is, then you come in for your appointment, you have your pre-op, you do this, you do that. So you're just going along this whole plan. You don't really have much time to really sit and think about it. You just go on autopilot. Well, I did anyway.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until much later that I really started to see the emotional fallout from it.
Yeah. And you and I have spoken in depth, obviously, having known each other for so long. And even after your surgery, when you did get a little bit better, you came over to Australia to visit and things, and we'd have deep conversations. And same about, like you said, with children, you didn't feel like you wanted them, certainly not at that time anyway, but then you kind of reflected on that a little bit, felt like that rug was pulled underneath you, like that option was taken away. But also recovering from a physical perspective where people can see you hobbling and shuffling around and it's fairly evident you've had something majorly big, some major surgery, and you've been unwell, and I imagine you're not looking the best either and all that. But then when you start to recover and you can get around a little bit more, what was that like then? Like, how did you feel it in conversations that I've had with other people when they've had something so big and significant, or they've been so unwell and, they've had cancer and, some illness or however that may look, it's the afterwards, because you've got all these people around you, all that support, that emotional support, not always doing or saying the right things. We might talk and dive into that a little bit more, but I know from their perspective, which is, like you said before, like, oh, your family were amazing, those who love you hard, and they just want to fix it. That's what they want to do. They just want to fix it. How can we fix this? And they can't. So then the next thing is to rally around you and give you that support and that emotional support and everything else. But then once you get the tick, which you did, which is amazing, thank God, you got the tick of health in the sense of all clear. Everyone goes back to normal. She's good now. But that's not the case, is it?
No, and I think because I looked fine.
Yeah.
And I'd had the news we all wanted to hear.
Yeah.
It was like, great, massive celebration. Lisa's sorted now. Everything can go back to normal. Except for me, nothing was ever going to go back to normal. It had fundamentally changed my perception of myself, the way I felt, so many things. My whole life, my identity as a woman even was very much challenged through this. I really did feel, despite never really wanting children, the fact that I couldn't have them, I just felt like I'd failed as a woman. I felt completely empty, like physically, metaphorically, like I'd really felt like I'd just lost the core of being a woman and who would want me.
That's so sad. That's so sad. And so where did you go from there? Did you get therapy? Did you talk to someone? Did you, because like you've mentioned it to me before as well, when you said earlier on about you kind of closed off a bit and not oversharing too much because it's almost a fear of what they're going to say next. And, bless, like people do, they genuinely come from, well, let's hope that most people genuinely come from the right place, but they don't necessarily say the right thing. And so there was a few reactions like that for you. And so for you then to, because you've had the tick, you're all good, it's like second lease of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is it. This is amazing. Second lease of life, you're good. Let's go.
Yeah.
And you're going, well, actually, grateful, super grateful, like amazing. You got through that and, thank goodness. But actually, I haven't caught up yet.
And I can't go back to who I was because I'm not the same.
No.
I'm not. I'm never going to be that carefree person because, you've got the fallout from the physical side of things, the treatment and all the rest of it. But then you've also got the ever-present fear of, well, what if it comes back?
Yeah.
And I used to go in for 3-month checkups and it was at the local cancer centre and I was walking past people that were actually having chemo. So it's very confronting. Thank goodness that wasn't my reality.
Of course.
But it really does remind you of where you could be.
Yeah.
And so that's difficult as well because, you get a pain somewhere and you think, oh my God, like, is it second, has a cancer come back? Is it? And you Dr. Google.
Well, most people, you talk to most people, we're all a doctor, aren't we? Yeah. We're all on Dr. Google. And because it's so, which is great, like we know more about more things now, or we think we do. We're educated a little bit more. It's all over social media and different things, or everyone knows someone who's suffered or had cancer, or it's just in our faces a lot more now. So people they get a pain, they get a headache, which is disclaimer to all our audience, like you don't ever doubt yourself and go to the doctor and do all that. But there is that paranoia when you've had a fit, when you've been healthy all your life, and just for someone like me in that sense. So for you who's gone through that, of course, you're going to have that.
Yeah. And you're Googling, secondary cervical cancer and it's saying, it might come back in your bones, it might come back in your liver. And all of the options it's giving you are, if you do get a secondary recurrence, it'll be terminal. And so you're reading that as well, and you want to be thankful and grateful and excited for the future, but at the same time you've got this huge shadow over you of just what if? What's going to happen a year, 2 years, 5 years down the line? Nobody knows, but you just don't know, and you lose that sense of innocence because I'd always been really healthy up until that point, and even at the point I was diagnosed, I was perfectly healthy. I remember telling somebody at work and she said, but you don't look ill. I said, I don't feel ill.
Yeah.
I was.
It's crazy, isn't it? So did you, during that time, you became single as well, of choice of yours, and started to rebuild your life as best you could, moving forward into like further relationships then, because you're wounded. Obviously, that wound's there and will be forever there in a mentally sense. Do you know what I mean? But you've gone from someone who, you know, really confident, outgoing, didn't want to have children. It was going to be on your terms, basically, and very confident with that. To how did the dating world look to you then? Like you'd recovered in a physical sense, and you know, what was the time period from recovering, being single for a while?
I didn't date for a long time. I got the cancer in September 2010, and then my relationship ended around about July 2011. The first real big thing I actually did was go travelling.
Yeah.
So I could get a 6-month leave from work, but even that, I was obliged. I could have that. I was obliged to have it. However, when I put the request in, my director said to me, "You're running away." And I was like, "I'm not." And he was basically saying, wherever you go, you'll still be there. Your problems will still be there, and you'll still be there. And I said, "I'm aware of that."
Thank you. Well aware of that.
Thank you for that. But I have just been through a really traumatic experience, and I have no clue what the future will hold. And so while I've got this opportunity and I'm still young and fit and able, I'd really like to take it. And I'd really like it if you could give me a blessing and authorise the leave. Which he did. And I went away and I had an amazing time. But again, it's the weight of other people's opinions.
You just don't need to be justifying that, do you? You've got enough.
Don't.
It's it just blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind. So you travelled, and I was blessed because you came over to see us. And probably saw my crying baby, and there was moments Charlie had a couple of wobbles, didn't he? You probably thought, Jesus.
We had some fun times in supermarkets.
We did, when he was having his moment, bless him. And you go home. Again, it's like this, refreshed now. You'll be all refreshed. You've got it out of your system.
Yeah.
I know there was people saying that to you. You've travelled, got it all out of your system. Settle back in now and you're good. But you still weren't.
No.
Great.
I still wasn't. And luckily I got a really great opportunity not long after I came back, which was to go to London for 6 months to do a secondment, another job, which I accepted and had an absolute ball. It was great.
Needed.
It was really needed. It was a great change. It's a change that I didn't really know that I needed, to be honest. But
yeah.
It was phenomenal. And there I did a little bit of dating, online dating, more just to get me out during the week and to see some new places.
Yeah.
Didn't go beyond a first date with anybody, but it was just a bit of fun.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Which was what I needed.
Yeah.
At that point.
And you then go on to have another fairly serious relationship, which, how long did that? That was around
about 18 months.
Yeah.
And that was a nightmare, that relationship.
Horrendous.
Yeah, very emotionally abusive. And I think I attracted that person from a wounded place.
Yeah.
I really felt like, I don't know, I felt like I was ready for a relationship. I really wanted to be with somebody. But I was probably looking too much externally for something to validate maybe how I was feeling and to make me feel
there's a reflection.
Better. Yeah.
Or a projection.
Yeah.
And so then obviously you're having, you and I have spoken about with the being able to, have children. That held you back a little bit with future relationships because although you were quite firm on that in the beginning, but then moving forward and having that conversation because that right had been taken away from you, it looked differently.
Yeah, it's something that I really had to bring up very, very early on with anybody that I was thinking of dating.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to risk getting into a relationship.
For your follow-up after your surgery.
Further down the line,
and
they turned around and said, you know what, I actually do.
Obviously, everything went as well as it could. Like, everything, you know, was amazing in that sense. Like, it turned out
people out based on
well. Like, they'd got all the cancer all good. And they, you know, when you're having that conversation, you're delivering that conversation. Ask for is that an update? Like, if anything had really quite been flagged, or what the whys and the hows, or anything like that.
Not knowing how, I did definitely think something how they'll strange perceive you because prior to that I could go into a relationship and it was really just about did they like me as a person. I didn't have any suddenly you've got quote unquote issues to bring to the table that, you know, needed slow growing to be discussed. So it just felt like it came out of nowhere, a big handicap and something that what is all that about. But that was just a thought I was having in my brain, and I didn't really verbalise that. Very hard to have those conversations. My appointments.
And also, I would imagine on the, you know, on the small percentage of
then go back and check
if you had met the right person and they pushed for children earlier on,
and that may have been around about 6 months,
right?
And we'll let you know when that's concluded.
Chance. Do you know what I mean?
So
is that fair to say? With you?
Again, didn't think anything of it at that point. I thought it was would have been standard procedure. And because I came away, I still had my ovaries, I was still producing eggs too much as part of.
But previously to having the cancer, did it take 6 months before they came back to you? Had you,
they didn't actually
you know,
come
if
back
someone
to me,
had come along?
Interestingly,
I guess what I'm trying to say is that
I was going to see them every 3 months anyway.
Yes, after post surgery, you still had your ovaries. It was going to be harder for you. Still not impossible. I mean, gosh, what they can do now, amazing
and
stuff.
I know they only go back 10 years because
previous to that, when you were like, no, I don't want to have them.
They can't be retested.
Right. But there's like subconsciously a slight chance there that if someone comes along, that could very well change. You hear about it all the time, don't you?
Someone comes along and blows your socks off. You think, oh, do you know what? I've never really considered that.
No,
yeah, with you, but every single test.
Oh my God.
So for 10 years,
you come out of the abusive
longer, they just couldn't say
relationship.
This had been silently growing.
Do you then go, so what like, are you thinking, reflecting, going, then, actually, I need to do some work here because it's showing up in other areas? Are you at that stage? Like, what's that like for you?
Maybe to have completely wrong test, or even just to have bad luck after to have cancer. Irrespective, it may not have shown clearly had an issue something that just happened. That person, but to see, and I remember saying to the therapist, over again, what I need to do, but they do some misdiagnosed that do not attract anybody like that. Biggest slap in the face. I could not believe what I was seeing, and I was also angry because I did wonder to myself, if I'd not have pushed, would they ever have disclosed those results? Because they were so bad.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's terrible. So what did the consult say? Did he?
I don't remember. I think the red mist had descended by that point. It wasn't really.
As rightly so, I think you had a license and then some to just go on one.
Yeah, I just remember walking back to my car from that appointment, and I called my mum, and I was absolutely livid, and I said, Mum, I'm going to sue them. And she said, well, what do you mean? You can't. I said, I can, and I will. And I did.
Oh my God.
Is that working? It's got a little camera thing on it.
Yeah, I think we're good anyway now.
To make sure.
No, we can finish there now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
Well done.
Thanks.
There was things I was like, what do I have to?
Yeah, like what do I have to remember?
Well done, babe. Sorry to relive that. Jesus, that's therapy in itself, isn't it? or makes it worse. That's right. Oh, darling. There's a part in there that just listen to the edits because I realised we've forgotten a bit. Look at that moon. Oh my God. What's full moon tomorrow? That's insane. Yeah. Beautiful.
Like, you didn't make sense. That's not my fault.
So you're walking away. Listen to me.
Yeah?
Come here so I can
Hold
see
on,
you.
let me just turn everything off.